Alright everyone, welcome back to another Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes video with Fat Phil, and today we are going to be talking about the top 10 non-galactic legend teams inside of Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes. We are not going to be doing this in terms of GAC or Territory Wars, or we're going to do this just in general. I'm going to try to remove any bias from Omicrons, Datacrons, because I think when you're looking at investing in teams, if you get too focused on a game mode, you end up in a situation where you have, this like Starkiller and Malgus, or you've got Boba Fett signed to Django, and all of a sudden you're like, wait, I can't use them in TB, I can't use them in Conquest. What do you mean that I need extra Omicrons for Territory Wars? Like, we're going to look at the teams that, hey, even without an Omicron investment, even without some broken Datacron, there's still really quality characters inside of SWGOH. So, let's give a huge shout out to our channel members, as always, for their continued support. If you are ever interested, that link is below, along with a link to Discord. Go check it out, guys. Thank you again for keeping the faith, for being real with me, criticizing when possible, and just being all-around fantastic people. I love you guys so much. I can't thank you enough for just sticking around and making this channel what it is. So, let's get in here. Let's rate these teams. Alright, so of course we got the start game there. Come on now. Like, back out of it. Let's get going here. There we go. Alright, so honorable mention here has to go to General Skywalker's 501st. This is the honorable mention. The biggest flaw this team has is no protection recovery, and that works twofold. Not just for General Skywalker himself, because that could obviously get very broken, but even for the clones. You can whittle away at their protection. Sure, you can't drop their health, but you can whittle away at their protection while General Skywalker is still standing, and then as soon as he drops, you just kind of hammer him down. It feels like at the time they were released, that made a lot of sense, but with how many AoE attacks are in the game now and other factors, this team sometimes just feels a little bit lackluster. There's still some really cool and interesting things they can do, but I'd say overall they definitely have lost a lot of the steam that they once held at that point. And at number 10, we've got the Gungans. They, in my opinion, they counter just enough to go ahead of General Skywalker. I'd say the bigger thing here is offensively, they can be a fantastic tool because if the AI isn't targeting that shield generator, there's a lot more manipulation that you can do. On defense, there's obviously some teams that beat this that are not ideal, but they're still a very good team. I feel like they've got a lot of very interesting mechanics. They do well in various game modes, and being immune to that percent health-based damage, damage over times don't really do anything because of how little health they actually have. It really does stop a lot of counters that otherwise exist for teams like this. It's a really interesting team. I'd say the biggest flaw, in my opinion, is they fall quickly to certain... Again, like, you can target the shield generator, but if you can kind of isolate the right characters, it becomes a lot easier to deal with this team. By isolate, that doesn't just mean isolate from Traya and GAC, even though that does work. But if you can kind of, do a stun or some other things, it just makes dealing with this team a lot easier. But again, they do counter just enough to at least sneak into that top 10. Next, we've got the Dark Trooper Moff Gideon team. This Dark Trooper Moff Gideon team is fantastic. This is just a phenomenal team. I would actually say that it might be a little bit low here at number 9. And I'd say the one reason it's lower is because Dark Trooper Moff Gideon is your engine for this. He's kind of the one that's going to be running the show. And a lot of the counters to this team are all about just controlling him. I can let some of these other characters take turns. If I can control Dark Trooper Moff Gideon, I'm going to control the fight. And so I think there's a few really easy counters to this team that you might not necessarily want to give up. However, I will say on offense, what you can do with them is incredible. And remember, Dark Trooper Moff Gideon has a revive, so that's one of the big things on it from an offensive perspective here. You bring them on offense, and your ability to counter some teams that otherwise maybe you wouldn't be able to handle increase, significantly. I think they carry over really well into PvE content, better than a lot of other teams, actually. So they definitely deserve to be in this conversation. And the 9th slot, again, fat-filled personal opinions here. Come at me in the comments. We've got this Saw Guerrera Rebel team here, and I was really struggling where to put this team. The more that I use this team, the more impressed I get. Whether you're putting Sharut and Baze here, you could put Drogon and Captain Rex here. I mean, you've got some really good possibilities. What I will say here that elevates this team to some levels is, again, in some game modes, if you're going up against a team that doesn't have a way to deal with buffs, this team will just destroy you. There's nothing you can do. If you have a team that does deal with buffs, they fall pretty rapidly, and all of a sudden you're kind of like, yo. I think the reason I have them in this 8 slot is because they do have some really, really good mechanics that even make some Galactic Legends, that give some Galactic Legends a extremely challenging time to beat this team. Now, I do believe right now in the game, why I kind of have them here, not higher, is because I think they're getting propped up by some of the more recent Datacrons, and so I tried to move them down, because I would say right now, this team is operating at some levels beyond what it really normally is, but a lot of that is due to the Datacrons, and so I tried to put it where I believe that Datacron, without it, where it belongs. And that's kind of a similar situation with Dark Trooper Moff Gideon up here as well. When he had his Datacron, it was like, holy crap, this team is, GL galore. And as soon as that went away, they kind of came back to earth, and you realize that there's enough counters to this team that you don't need to worry too much. So that's kind of where I've got this one. Again, I think with these bottom couple of teams, you could kind of rearrange them in any order. There's not a lot separating them, but when you're making one of these lists, you've got to have some controversy, right? And that's where we head next with the Nightsisters on Peridea. This team continues to just prove how good they can be. Why I'm putting them above this Saw Guerrera team, above Gungans, above the Dark Trooper Moff Gideon team, is the sheer fact that a lot of those teams where you can sometimes struggle is a lack of damage. If you lose a character or there's not enough damage on the team, you might not kill something. Because that can 1000% happen. If you don't have enough damage on this Saw Guerrera team, you might not kill things. If you don't have enough damage on the Dark Trooper Moff Gideon team, you could time out, or, there's certain instances where damage can become a problem. This team, it's not just about the damage, but remember, Doomed will reduce that character's max health. So there's not just this impact of the damage this team deals, but the fact that the Great Mothers can go and reduce your max health, and that makes it easier to get that kill and doom the next character. So this is a team that really punishes the enemy for that battle going on and on, that, hey, if I doom the right character, reduce their max health, I kill them, and then I can move to the next one. And that's kind of what makes this team a little bit more of a threat than some of these other ones, is that as that battle goes on, you are not just weakening them through damage, but through that max health reduction. I would also say here what makes this team a little bit different than, say, the Dark Trooper Moff Gideon team, and kind of applies with this Saw Guerrera team as well. Saw and Luthen, Great Mothers, the kind of engines to these teams, have a tank supporting them, right? You think Luthen brings that summon. You could put Baze Malbus in there to help also tank. You've got Morgan Elsbeth in this team, in the Peridea team here, the Nightsisters, to tank and kind of hide Great Mothers. And I think that's a significant part that sometimes goes missing with that Dark Trooper Moff Gideon team, is you have that ability to kind of hide the more valuable characters to this team, and it just can cause all sorts of issues if you aren't prepared to counter it. The next team we've got on the list is Darth Malgus. And the Darth Malgus team, does not need Omicrons to do good things. It's just fantastic. This team, they really have stood the test of time. As some of these new things have come in, they've still stood the test of time, still shown how brilliant they can be. And I think a lot of that has to do with Darth Revan and Malak, but also has to do with what Malgus brings to the table. Where I argue this team performs better than General Skywalker is that while General Skywalker can at times counter this team can also, counter General Skywalker, but there are certain teams General Skywalker will much more struggle with that Malgus eats for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. This team, there's a lot of, stun doesn't matter here. They're not a team where turn meter is extremely important. They've got a lot of control about fear and shock, and they've got healing immunity and doubt. They've got a lot of stuff that really just, you're ready for one thing, you're not ready for the next one. Oh, you're immune to percent health-based attacks? Well, good thing Malgus is going to deal damage based on his max health. You're immune to fear? Oh, that's all right. We've got doubt. There's just, there's so many of these really interesting mechanics in this team to ensure that they continue to be where they are, and I think this is the perfect place for them. I really think they have shown their value over the years. And when you think about countering this team, even outside of, Grand Arena where their Omicrons are, you're still pulling out a very good team. It's not like you're countering them with, Tuskens. It's not easy. Oops, skipping too far ahead. Next, we've got the Baylan team. Baylan mercenaries have come in, really taken the world by storm. What I think this team has to offer is that fact that the 4th and 5th slots are kind of open. And so when it comes to putting different characters in there to align with different scenarios, that's where I think this team is going to shine. They are just so good. Every time I use them, I'm impressed by their ability to control the battle through stun or control the battle through, armor shreds or just high damage, lots of assists. There's also this, situation of they just have so much health and protection. They kind of stick around for a while. The more stacks of Soldier of Fortune they get, the worse it is for you. They've got a lot of ways to beat you. And that's something that I think is missing from some of these other teams up here is it's really kind of one way that this team will beat you. You think of the General Skywalker team. It's either General Skywalker or it's Rex that's going to beat you. There's some other forms of damage in here, but those are kind of your two biggest threats to deal with. With the Gungan team, once that shield generator dies, they kind of fall apart. Your Dark Trooper Moff Gideon team, you control him, you're kind of controlling everybody else. As you start to get down to some of these other teams, there's a lot of ways that they can beat you beyond just a damage or a particular debuff, that they've got multiple mechanics working for them that allow you to, that I would say allow them to beat you / be good on defense, and also force you to have to consider multiple different factors. Like you think in this team right here, Boba Fett, Sign of Django, and Shin can both ignore taunt. Let that sink in, that even in this team, some of these teams can't ignore taunt. Oh, those two can. So now you're getting around to target the characters that you need. Listen, Reva is next. All reliable. The Inquisitors are still one of the best teams. They've continued this kit. The SWGOH developers deserve a lot of credit for this team because it is still extremely, extremely useful. Whether it's TB, Territory Wars, Grand Arena, they continue to shine. They show their value. Their kits work really well together, and that's where I think the, comparative to, say, the Baylan team where, you're kind of swapping out these ones, this is a team that's pretty set in stone. Again, I know Merrick's Omicron changes that for TB, but we're going to pretend that doesn't exist for this. But what this team does is that all their, it's pretty set in stone. You know the way they work. Their kits all interact really nicely together. You've got AoE damage. You've got single fire damage. You've got, ability blocks and healing immunity and daze and turn meter removal, and there's turn meter gain opportunities. There's a lot of stuff that this team does that many others, you start off with a bonus turn, ability blocks. I can go on and on about how good this Inquisitor team is. It's one of the reasons I tell a lot of people to build them early, is because if you can get a whole guild getting Reva, get them early, it will stop so many things, because there's not great counters to this team. Even certain Galactic Legends can struggle against this team if you don't know what you're doing. If you don't follow the right strategy, certain GLs will still struggle against them because they have so many tools at their disposal. Next, we have Bo-Katan Mandalorians. The Bo-Katan Mandalorian team, I think this is, number 3 if we scroll back up. 1, or 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. Bo-Katan Mandalore at number 3 slot. I think this is the perfect place for them. This is the way. This team beats a lot of really good things, whether they have the Omicrons on them or not. They, again, very similar to Inquisitors in this regard. The Inquisitors and this team have, this kind of even as the fight goes on, there's still a lot of ways they'll beat you. They've got good debuffs. The thing with the Inquisitors that ramps it up for me is they not just have that like blatant true damage or blatant physical damage, but they have a lot of instances of true damage. And with how, I'd say, prevalent defense is becoming, whether it's from datacrons or kits, true damage has continued to show how valuable it can be. And that true damage is coming from Bo-Katan herself, Beskar Mormando's Whistling Birds, Paz Vizsla's Basic. There's a lot of that opportunity for that true damage. And that just really can amp this team when you're going up against them and you're like, crap, I have, modded for all this defense and it's pointless because they're just going to go right through that. You've got, attacks out of turn, assists, cleanses, dazes, buff dispels, and they're coming from multiple angles. And that, I think, really helps you control, like this team, it allows a lot of control on offense. Defensively, again, it depends on what you're going up against them with. I think a lot of us bring them on offense because when you're controlling them, you can do a lot more. Again, the AI in this game, sometimes it's great, like the Ahsoka, which I'll cover in another video. That's got a hell of a lot better lately. Other teams, there's a lot to be desired, and this is one where I'd say the best use is always going to be bringing them on offense and letting them do their thing. The number 2 slot is the Queen Amidala team. This is one of the most annoying teams in the game right now. There's so many little mechanics that like rear their ugly head depending on what you put in and what you take out of this team. Like, oh, I'm just going to use Bane. Oh, Bane didn't work. Oh, I'm going to use, Gungans or Great Mothers or, oh, this happened or that happened. And all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, like, they just massacred me. And you didn't even, you blink and the fight's over. They are between, turn meter manipulation, between healing over time, protection over times, the attacks out of turns. It's endless. And I'd say one of the most challenging aspects is once they get under stealth and you're sitting there just having to target that handmaiden and you're like, she summoned the handmaiden, they're under stealth and I'm waiting. And you're like, oh, they're going to get the handmaiden again and I'm screwed. Like it's not a fun team. I think this is probably one of the most, if not the most annoying team in the game to deal with, simply because depending on the characters here, it can completely change what you're going to be bringing to potentially beat them. And offensively, they do some insane things on offense. And territory battles is where I think this team shines because you've got them at Relic 9 if you did the raid, and they're beating Ring of Kafrene, pretty consistently for me. I'm not going to say it's 100% consistent because there's some modding elements there, but man, they're a good team. But they pale in comparison to the number 1 non-galactic legend team in the game. Yes, Bane still counts. This guy continues to just be the best non-galactic legend in the game. He's better than some galactic legends because he just, I'm going to use Bane. He lifts a galactic legend, and sometimes with that GL, doesn't even help him beat what he needs to beat. He doesn't need him to beat other things. I think Darth Bane is just, gosh, I could go on and on about this character. The biggest flaw Darth Bane has is 0 defensive viability. And obviously that's a problem, right? Anytime that a character doesn't have any defensive viability, you want to cry. But I think Bane is still fantastic. The teams that he beats, he has the capability to beat every single team on this list here. I will say the one team that he at times can struggle with is right here. Depending on the datacrons on this team, the datacron on your Bane, the stats and everything else, I have seen this team completely steamroll Bane because you either don't have enough survivability, you're dealing a lot of damage, you didn't bring the right, second unit with him. So I do want to make sure that I preface with that Bane will lose to the Queen Amidala team if you're not careful. But I think where the Queen Amidala team kind of has that ceiling of, yep, I'm not going to beat this team, Bane still has that opportunity to go and just completely destroy the enemy at every step of the way. That's my list of non-galactic legend rankings. Let me know if you guys agree with this list. Where did I go wrong? I'd love to hear from you. Please like and subscribe, comment down below, and if you are still watching right now, go ahead and say Wampa needs a rework in the comment section. I love you all. May the force be with you, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers, my friends.